So yeah, we're talking about Batman Year One, a classic comic.
I had never read it, but I've like heard the title.
Yeah.
I read Dark Knight Returns.
That's what I was wondering, because I figured you did, because that's kind of like, that's, pretty well permeated and stuff, and I figured, it would be hard to, not cross paths with that at some point,
I think I had mentioned before that my buddy's dad had it.
Okay.
And I would read it at his house.
Would it be, on the bookshelf?
Bookshelf, yeah.
I love it, when you go to somebody's house and you see a bookshelf, and then it's like and if there's, one cool thing like that,
yes.
It really, it kind of like a house really feels alive if there's a cool bookshelf, and it's like I was over somebody's house and it's that bookshelf had sort of the typical stuff, and then it's they had the first 3 volumes of Wonder Woman, of the Wonder Woman comics in chronological order, and I was like, okay, this is awesome, and you grab it off and flip.
You gotta flip through the stuff, and it was always exciting seeing what kind of media was at your friend's parents' house.
Yeah, and how cool are your friends' parents? How cool are your parents and how cool are your friends' parents? Because it is kind of okay, in my house, it's I didn't there were a couple of Beatles albums, that my mom had when she was a kid and stuff. So it's okay, that's
My mom when we did our David Bowie episode, she's like, you should have told me we're doing David Bowie. I would have let you borrow my old David Bowie t-shirt.
Okay, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, my mom, as far as I know, doesn't have a David Bowie t-shirt.
So she used to have a David Bowie t-shirt, and she loves the Beatles. Mm-hmm. I'll have to show off her records. She gave me her old records, some of them, so I'll have to show them to you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, but it is kind of like that. And then if you go to somebody's house and there's nothing good on the bookshelves, or worse still, you go to somebody's house and there's no bookshelves. That says a lot.
Yeah,
I am not a fan of people's houses who don't have bookshelves.
When I was also younger, my mom's friend Gigi, at her house, they had these nice white shelves where when the lights were low in the room, it had the lights inset where you could see the books on there, and she had all the Stephen King books, and I would be afraid to go near them because I thought monsters were gonna come out of the books or something, and it's creeped me out seeing the It font on the shelf. I'm like, whoa.
You're right. That is that was. Now that you mention it, it's in the 80s and 90s, that was that was something you'd see at your friend's house, and I remember seeing The Stand, being oh, that looks interesting, and not knowing much about the books, so it's just trying to infer from the art that you see on the spine, or maybe if you pull it out and look at the cover, and The Stand, I think it had these weird allegorical figures this. Yeah. It looked almost like Spy versus Spy.
There was a scythe. Somebody was holding a scythe. On there, and a jester.
There was a character all in black. I think it was the one with the blade, and then there was a guy all in white, and it made me think of the Spy versus Spy.
But I would always be afraid to even with my mom's Stephen King books, open them up and
you're gonna let the curse
out.
Yeah. The Dark Knight Returns. I remember seeing that in a bookstore, and I was real little, and it was, it was a brand new book or something. I remember seeing it in the bookstore and being completely freaked out. But, it felt so wrong. It felt kind of like a dirty book or something. Because it was like Batman, and I'm thinking, Adam West or something. And then it's, this kind of scary kind of... And you flip through it, and you're oh, what's going on? I wasn't ready for it yet,
Tom, whenever we were flipping, through the book, through the Dark Knight Returns at my buddy's house... After my mom picked me up, I was still shaken from when the Joker snaps his neck. I was still been thinking I was in 6th grade or something. That's so fucked up. Mm-hmm. God, I was that's insane.
Yeah. The Batman movies hadn't come out yet, so it was to me Batman was Adam West. So it was it was extra. It would be seeing a Mr. Rogers comic or something where Mr. McFeely's breaking somebody's neck or something,
or Mr. Rogers is getting his 1,000 confirmed kills as his sniper, or he's kicking ass as a vigilante.
Yeah, when you see his tats, his sweater covers up.
He's he's talking to the kids that he's well, that's our show, and he goes down and he gets ready to go out like Batman and beat someone's ass. Yeah. He's got kendo sticks and a fucking sniper rifle, and he rolls his sleeves up. We gotta do the fucking. We gotta do that.
I hate the I hate that Mr. Rogers that urban legend.
That's the
I
urban
hate
legend.
it so much. And it's debunked. Well, we're joking about it.
Yes,
It is complete bullshit. If anybody out there is operating under the assumption that that Mr. Rogers was like a killer by night kind of thing, completely false.
The Tom,
verified false. That's cool that you never read this. I'm glad to be introducing you to something kind of cool like this. I actually read Batman Year One before I ever read Dark Knight Returns. Again,
wow.
I wasn't quite ready for it.
What year was Dark Knight Returns?
Dark Knight Returns was 86. And yeah, this was shortly after that. And this is the copy I had, as a kid that I got when I was in 7th grade or something. And the coloring, I don't know if you want to take a look through this one.
Wow,
the coloring's a little different. This is the way I knew it, and it had this, I think it's the same guy, I think Richmond Lewis does the color for both versions, but he colored it completely different in both versions. In this version, this is a reprint, a really nice extra-sized reprint. They made 2 volumes, and one of them is printed like the trade paperback colors, and the other is printed like the comic book colors, because this ran as just like a regular comic in 1987 or whatever, and just 4 issues of I think Batman. It was just 4 issues of the regular Batman comic. So imagine you're reading your regular Batman comic, and then all of a sudden
this shows up.
And so he colored this one way, sort of taking advantage of that sort of classic comics palette, and then this one was okay, let's get a little more painterly, a little more experimental. So I mean, I always knew this one, but then read this one relatively recently and was kind of blown away. They're both really nice, but I mean, my taste kind of favors that a little more. But
Tom, this is like a great companion to Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, because you were talking about comics need an ending,
right?
And what an opening, or what an origin story for Batman.
Because Frank Miller had done an ending to Batman. He had put the capper on Batman, which kind of got Alan Moore thinking about hey, let's give Superman a capper. So yeah, it's okay, Frank, let's give Batman a beginning. And they had sort of reset the continuity around that time too. So it's it's a fresh slate. And now he uses a lot of the classic elements, but they're sort of there, but then he just throws in so many other things.
I want this tattooed on my face.
Yeah,
I love this. I kept going back to this.
Yeah, that's David Mazzucchelli. David Mazzucchelli's the artist on this, and it's just such a great team up. The 2 of them together, just really magic happens. They collaborated a few times. They collaborated also on a Daredevil story.
Oh, Tom, I was craving some Frank Miller. I don't know much about the Frank Miller Daredevil and David Mazzucchelli. I would love to your recommendations for that.
Yeah, maybe we could do that. Frank Miller does Dark Knight Returns with the inker Klaus Janson, and then it's colored by Lynn Varley. But Frank Miller's writing it, drawing it, and then he's got an inker, and then he does Batman Year One, where he's got somebody else just doing the art completely. Daredevil was kind of he's doing, writing and art himself, and then, I mean, he had a co-writer in the beginning, but then pretty soon pretty early on, he becomes the solo writer, artist, and then later on he sort of comes back a couple times as, just the writer for Daredevil, and so, he teams up with Dave Mazzucchelli for one of the ones he comes back for.
Was his work on Daredevil, did that precede this?
Yeah, the Daredevil stuff came first. That's kind of how, he got the, it's sort of you got to work your way up, and Daredevil was kind of a third-rate character at the time, so, and he was, a beginner, and so it's they put him on Daredevil, and then he created something great, and then it's okay, now you got your pick of, whatever you want to do.
And also I in Batman Year One, there's some Batman-y tropes that aren't really that he doesn't overdo it. It's my parents are murdered, or he doesn't over hammer that home, and
yeah, because it Dark Knight Returns kind of had that he can sort of take a different approach as you know, as opposed to Dark Knight, because Dark Knight Returns did have that. Dark Knight Returns had him having like these PTSD flashbacks and his eyes getting real big and you know, thinking about his parents murdered. Where in this, it is like,
And you know what? Like I'm fucking obsessed with this. I'm going to buy it too, just like I bought the.
Well, I recommend getting that one that I showed you. It's like it's 2 volumes side by side, and so then you have both versions, and it's just beautiful. And then in the back, it's got like all kinds of like it's got the script.
Oh, holy cow!
And it's got like sketches and stuff in the back. So it's like a really, and it's got this little you know, bookmark thing. So yeah, it's a really, so I recommend grabbing that one. It's you know, easy enough to find.
I'm gonna score that. And the colors, I like the choice of the palette they use. Like feels like kind of like greenish whites, maroons, like oranges, blacks, blues. Like I love that.
It's interesting to me, like you reading this now, because when I read it, you know, I read it in like the late 80s, you know, early 90s, and it was, you know, before the movies, before Batman the Animated Series, before the Christian Bale movies, you know, before everything. So it's like so much of the stuff in, like you would, like, it kind of almost doesn't feel, it doesn't seem, it might not seem as revolutionary because all that stuff has sort of been worked into the fabric. Like there's a lot of sequences and stuff that have been taken in the various movies. They've never done, as far as I've seen, I mean, maybe there's like an animated movie or something, but you know, when they did Batman Begins, I thought, oh, are they going to pretty closely follow Batman Year One? And they don't. There's like a couple sequences that kind of line up, but it was still a different kind of fresh approach. So like they've never done it exactly, but enough of like the elements have sort of, you know.
Because even in the the Batman the Animated Series episode, when the police are coming after Batman, it felt very much like the police like scenario. Like I know the police are usually after Batman in a lot of his adventures.
Well, that's another thing too. Like I feel like that's a Frank Miller thing that has become just part of Batman in general, like Batman versus the SWAT team kind of thing, where that was not part of Batman. You know,
it's like
prior
a new
to
move.
That was a new move that Frank Miller introduced. That now just feels like, oh, that's classic Batman. Yep. That's just, you know.
And Selena Kyle's look in that, I think they used that in the Robert Pattinson Batman movie.
Oh, sure. And also, like, Miller is doing this, and he basically draws Halle Berry. But like Halle Berry isn't Halle Berry yet. I think Halle Berry was like a teen, like was like a child star at that point. So it's not like, oh, I'm gonna make, you know, it feels like one of those things like, oh, I'm gonna model so and so after so and so, but it's like no, that's you know, kind of that's anachronistic. Like he just he creates this drawing that is like perfect for Halle Berry to play her, you know. And so when they made a Catwoman movie, it's like perfect. Okay, yeah, there we go.
I kind of like too that the Batman is he's pretty fallible in this.
Like, yeah, because he's still learning. You know, that it's kind of a cool sweet spot because Frank Miller never really did like Batman in the middle of his career comics. You know, like he did Batman at the very end, then he does Batman at the very beginning, and then he did like Batman when he first meets Robin, where it's still the beginning. It's still the beginning. So he never. So like Batman can mess up because like in Dark Knight Returns, Batman can mess up because, oh, I'm getting too old for this shit. I'm losing my touch. And then Batman can be fallible in this one because he's like still learning. It's still a learning process. So it's kind of cool. You can have.
I love Batman. It. And he's like away for like 12 years. Comes back and he's like, I think it's time to start kicking ass or whatever. But I like when he's out in like his yard, like breaking like shit.
Yeah.
And then
that there's a nice thing to that too because. Like there's this scene early on where he's practicing in his yard, and then he like kicks a tree right down the middle, and then it becomes, you know, like the groundwork laying for like later on he's in this like really bad situation where like the SWAT team's closing in on him, and then he like kicks this like you know, support beam or whatever to knock it. So it's like, you know, it's nice, you know, nice setup, yeah.
And like when he kind of like screws up a little too when he drops it on those guys on the fire escape.
Right, yeah, because he's still learning stuff and he's figuring it out, and he has to learn like the Batman gimmick. You know, like first he's just, I'm gonna do a one-man war on crime or whatever, and then like sort of trial by fire learns that like, oh, it's not working. I need a gimmick. And the way it's broken up into, because like each one is like a single issue of a comic, each chapter, and like the way it's broken up into chapters are pretty nice, because it's like the first one, it's like the last page is, the Batman origin, where it's like a bat flies in his window and he's like, I'll become a creature of the night kind of thing. Like that's the last page, and it's like, oh, you're like really pumped for like the next one.
He's in an Ozzy Osbourne concert and he sees him bite the head off the bat.
Yes, that's another origin.
He's like, I'm gonna become Batman.
That's when Total Recall's Batman Year One is. Well, because you have to keep update, like the way the version of Zorro keeps getting updated, because like the version I was reading has like the letters columns, and there's a lot of people who are like, oh, I don't like this new thing, and then one of them was saying, because like he's coming out of the movie The Mark of Zorro. And like one of the letter writers is like, The Mark of Zorro is too recent. It's too recent. Which I think Mark of Zorro was like a 50s movie. So it's like, no, Batman's older than that. And it's like, well, no. And so they keep changing which version of Zorro. So like in the Joker movie, the version of Zorro that he was leaving was the George Hamilton Zorro. So like, next is going to be Antonio Banderas Zorro.
Of course,
the next time. So they are going to. So, but like,
Zorro. They're like, why does that Zorro have a ferocious tan?
So we gotta, we have to update it to like he's at an Ozzy Osbourne concert, and it can't even be like an Ozzy Osbourne concert during the '80s or something. It would have to be like
solo,
late '90s, early 2000s or something.
He bites it off the bat.
Yeah,
comes back. He's like, I'm gonna fight crime as soon as this show's over. Mm-hmm. I paid a lot of money for these tickets.
And it would be Ozzy Osbourne doing it as like a reference to like, oh yeah, this famous thing about me, so it's like a gummy bat or something that he's like.
I like how it's not even the real.
Yeah, because again, the time keeps marching on, unless the Total Recall, which maybe the Total Recall Batman could be like an 80s period piece.
Yes.
My God. Where it's not today's Batman. It's like the Batman of the 80s and 90s. And this is how he got started.
It comes full circle. After he sees Ozzy bite the bat and becomes Batman, it's like Batman Year One. At the end of the year, he's like, stop it right there, scumbag. He's peeing on the Alamo. And and it turns out it's Ozzy. Yeah. He's like, you son of a bitch.
Yeah, I mean, now we're just writing the Ozzy Osbourne comic. It can't all be Ozzy.
Pissing on the Alamo.
Like, as a kid when I was reading this, I didn't get, like, all the references. But it is, like, Miller's just, like, drawing out of, like movie and TV kind of stuff. So you have, like, the sequence where it's like Taxi Driver, where he pulls up and he's kind of like Robert De Niro, and he gives himself a fake scar, and then he meets, like the Harvey Keitel pimp, and then he meets Jodie Foster,
His body type, the way he's being drawn, it reminds me in a good way of like Patrick Warburton, like David Putty, kind of like his.
He's kind of like, looks like a classic 50s kind of guy, because Mazzucchelli was modeling him after Gregory Peck. Gregory Peck. So he has that kind of classic look. And then, we're watching Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and Sarah Essen, the police lieutenant who Commissioner Gordon has like an affair with, she kind of looks like the lead from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Although I know that like the timeline doesn't line up. So
she does, yeah. Maybe Spielberg read it, and it's like, we need a.
There's like there's this a cliche of like cop movies that like they've been talking about on the Video Archives podcast, where they talk about how like, the cop in a cop movie, in the old days, like before Bullet, it was always like the guy's miserable. Yeah. He's got like a shitty apartment. He's got a shitty marriage and this has that too. Like, and then there's like some Godfather stuff too, because there's like the mob boss, and he's like, oh, let me tell you,
he's like, I like when he goes to the mansion, like Batman goes to their like little meetup, and is like, you're all fucked. He's like, I'm coming for everyone.
Yeah, because up to that point, the police commissioner and sort of the powers that be, they kind of think this Batman thing is kind of fun, and it spices things up, and it's popular. He's like, hey, it's popular with the people, so I'm not going to go after him. But then it's like Batman's like, oh no, like you guys are on the top of my shit list. So yeah, it was pretty nice. And then he declares all out war on him.
This was Tom, fucking fabulous. Holy shit! Like Thank you so much.
Oh,
And
you're
like
welcome.
the I had just I heard Batman Year One, Batman Year One.
It's definitely like old New York. Like when they were making the Joker movie, even though the Joker doesn't show up in this, he just kind of gets like referenced at the very like the last panel. This is like the New York that we see in the Joker
Yes.
movie. You know, it's this like, you know, obviously it's Gotham, but it's modeled on New York. And,
Super gritty.
yeah. Yeah, like the subway ride, you know, the subway ride in. And I like the parallel journeys that Commissioner Gordon and Bruce Wayne are on. Like, I feel like that was like a really good thought, like a really good insight to like show their parallel. Because like, you would never think of that. And like, Commissioner Gordon is kind of this like, you know, this old guy, you know, like prior to Frank Miller, he was just kind of like, you know, who cares? He's just kind of there. But in this, it's like he's kind of young. And then by like the final panel, he kind of becomes the classic Commissioner Gordon because he's still got kind of like brownish, blondish hair and stuff in the beginning. But then at the end, there's kind of like a spotlight or something on him and just cast everything in white, and he's got his pipe.
Oh,
and like
of
all
course,
of a
you're
sudden,
like,
it's like, oh yeah, like the forging of an icon.
I like when Gordon's kicking ass too with those corrupt cops.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's really nice. And then the commissioner, because it's like, oh, he's not Commissioner Gordon yet. He's just Lieutenant Gordon or whatever. And then like the current commissioner has like, he's like a pop art collector or like a kitsch collector. Basically, like everybody. He's like it's kind of like, oh, isn't this weird? This like grown up who has all this like pop culture kitsch, but meanwhile that's like everybody now.
Yeah.
You know?
Like
that's us.
Us
know?
right now. We would
and what he's got like you know, black velvet paintings of clowns, which like my grandmother had a bunch of. They would always freak me out. And then he's got Charlie Brown stuff.
Yeah, I like how in this comic they're like, look at this fucking freak, and like meanwhile I'm like, oh boy, that's like I have everything he's got there.
Yeah, there's like a Casper the Friendly Ghost doll too that they're like, because they rob him at one point. The Catwoman and Jodie Foster, they like rob his house at one point, and they're like, what are we going to do with all this shit? And they're just like ripping the heads off of like Charlie Brown and Casper and stuff.
The commissioner on the other page, he looks like he could go into Superman's rogues gallery.
Right, definitely, yeah. Everybody's a Green Beret, like everybody was like in Nam, you know.
It's like that. This is pulled right from the '80s action movie.
Right,
trope. There's
exactly.
always a Vietnam connection.
Yes, it's like, you know, Miller's kind of thinking like, how do I make this stuff relatable to like an audience beyond just like comic book fanatics and stuff. And then each like the opening page, the opening splash of everyone is like a movie poster. It's designed like a movie poster, and it'll have like a tagline like a movie poster. What at the time, he has trained and planned and waited 18 years. He thinks he's ready, you know.
Oh,
and then one of the chapters is called Black Dawn. So it's like, you know, you just saw Red Dawn and you know, and you got like stuff. Again, this either like predates or is like concurrent with RoboCop, but like RoboCop was drawing a lot of stuff from, you know, Dark Knight Returns. Also, it was drawing stuff from like from comics in general, like Judge Dredd, but also like Dark Knight Returns. So, but it's got like these kind of like, you know, Lethal Weapon or like, you know, you know, these RoboCop kind of situations where there's like a hostage, you know, situation, and you have to like go in, and then like shooting range stuff, you know.
In 80s, 90s action movies, there's always the scene at the shooting range.
Mm-hmm. I like when they got like the drawings. They have like drawings of what Batman could be, and so there's one where he's like just like a supernatural, like just like a demon or something, and then there's one where he's just kind of like Zorro, and then there's one where it's like, okay, that's pretty close. That's,
I like that. It reminds me of like the demon or Demon's Crest.
Yeah, right. And you have a neck brace.
You know, we're huge fans of the foam neck brace on the Total Recall.
Really well placed action set pieces. You know, so like, you know, trying to, you know, stop the truck from running over the lady and stuff, and then being like the big one is like, being trapped in this building, and it kind of like when he's trapped in that building, and then the cops drop a bomb on it. Like, this is shortly after, like, growing up in Philly, there was, like, Osage Avenue. It was, like, and The Move, and, like, they dropped, the police flew a helicopter. Like, Frank Miller's totally referencing this, but they flew a helicopter into like a neighborhood, and then the police flew this helicopter in and then dropped a bomb
Holy shit.
on this like
Community
house, like on this house in the middle of this sort of densely packed. It was in like West Philly, and it's like the houses there are all like very densely packed, and they just burn up like the whole like this whole like
God.
block caught fire. And it was like, because there was some kind of like, it was like a cult or something that was inside just this one building, but it like took out like the whole neighborhood.
Holy
So
shit.
you know, it's referencing that.
Ripped
so
from the
this,
headlines.
yeah, this sort of like you know, and so then, you know, Batman has to like, you know, fight the guys who are dropping the bomb on
What's
his
the tagline for this?
They've got him cornered, they've got him outnumbered, they've got him trapped, they're in trouble.
Oh, these
You know,
are great
yeah.
taglines.
You know, a comedy that hits the road. Ouch. And so then it's Black Dawn.
What was the Die Hard?
Yeah.
With lots of laughs. Or was
Oh,
like
an action trill movie with a lot of laughs. That was not the poster. That was Yogi Berra's review. An action trill movie with a lot of laughs. That was Yogi's Corner. You know, if you're gonna do like a Batman like movie trilogy or whatever, you gotta have a sequence where, you know, he's in an abandoned building that's like falling apart, fighting like a SWAT team or whatever.
Then he calls upon the Bats.
The Bats, yeah, and they did that in Batman Begins. They took that.
Yeah, his alibi. They said
His alibi,
he was
yeah.
skiing on a ski trip.
You know, Harvey Dent, who we know is going to be Two-Face, but at this point they're still friends because, you know, and so it plays off of like what you would, you know, what's already established in like the old Batman comics, but then it also plays off of this like larger mythology that Frank Miller's making by having these bookends where it's like, okay, I wrote the last story of Batman, I wrote the first story of Batman, and now you fill out everything in between.
No.
So like Sarah, you know, the Commissioner Gordon's co-worker, Sarah is his wife in Dark Knight Returns, you know, and then in this he's married to Barbara, and then Barbara's pregnant, and you're like, oh, I guess that's going to be Batgirl. She's going to be giving birth to Batgirl. She's going to be giving birth to, you know, Barbara Jr. or whatever. And then it's like, it's a boy. So it's like, okay, I didn't know. Like, I knew Commissioner Gordon's daughter was Batgirl, Barbara Gordon. I didn't know he had a son. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, it's a boy. And it's like, oh, and then you realize, like, the reason why it's a boy is because, like, then when, like, the bad guys kidnap his baby, if it were just baby Barbara, you'd be like, oh, she's going to be okay. She's going to grow up to be Batgirl. But since it's a boy, it's like, I never heard of there being a boy. Like, is this kid gonna die? You know.
And then
give some like stakes and uncertainty. You know?
Was I losing my mind at the very end? Did it say the Joker was gonna poison Gotham's water?
Yeah, that was like kind of. And Miller's been doing that with like because he also did Superman Year One, and Superman Year One, you know, is like this big like this was relatively this was just a few years ago he did Superman Year One, but then it ends like the last page is like kind of teasing the arrival of Brainiac. So like he's dealing with all this other stuff, and then the last page like oh, I can't wait till Brainiac shows up, and like who knows if he'll ever do that. And that's how it is with this. It's like last panel's teasing the arrival of the Joker. Can't wait, when's it gonna happen? And then it was like, you know, 20 years later or whatever, he did All-Star Batman and Robin, which I'm like reviewing, you know.
I'm scoring that too, by the way.
Yeah, so he finally does that, and so the Joker shows up in there, but he doesn't do the because Year One of Batman is just like, you know, Batman becoming Batman, and then Year Two is just like whatever, and then Year Three is when Robin shows up. So he's having his first tussle with Joker in Year Two, you know. So it's like, so whenever Frank Miller gets around to doing Year Two, he did Year One, you know, technically Year Three by doing Robin, and then Year, you know, End, and then a sequel to that.
Got to do Year Two.
Get that Joker poisoning the reservoir. But also, like, if this is like it, you know, if Miller had just done Year One, it kind of makes if you read that and then you just read a bunch of old Batman comics, it kind of gives the old Batman comics a little extra weight. Like the comics get a little better having this, you know, this origin kind of buttressing them. You know, even though they were created before and independently of this.
Tom, I'm obsessed. You're like, thank you for sharing.
Oh, sure,
these.
yeah.
These are incredible. Like Superman and then the Superman title and this title. Like, yeah, because holy shit,
it just like enriches everything. And then you have all this Batman stuff, and it's like he's wearing the costume, and he's got his little like flying apparatus, and he's, you know, all this cool stuff. But then like the final action sequence is like all stripped down. There's no cape, there's no costume, he's just a guy, you know? And that, like, you see that show up in movies too, where it's like you gotta have a scene where it's like just him, but like having that be the you know, culmination is kind of cool. And it is, that was sort of the trajectory that Miller was sort of playing with, because his other thing with Mazzucchelli, Daredevil Born Again, is kind of like that too. It's like you take out all the superhero particulars, like, you know, at a certain point he's not wearing the Daredevil suit anymore, and then now he's got to fight these battles, you know, just as like a normal guy. Like, how much of this guy can we take away and still have him be Daredevil? So he kind of does that with Batman. How much of, you know, if you take away the cape and stuff, is he still Batman? And it's a pretty cool like little sequence there, you know.
Hell yeah! Like I did like Frank's and David. They were like using like the bat tech in there. I like where Batman was hiding stuff on like the bottom of his boots.
Yeah.
And like his little like hang. They have the hang glider in there. And stuff.
It is cool how every little bit is kind of like set up too and thought out, because then there's like a point where he's like, ooh, you know, all I got left is the blow dart. Blow darts in my boot, and then like a couple pages later, you start seeing people going, you know, getting a little, you know, and then
Vulcan neck pinching.
Yeah, he Vulcan neck pinches. Yeah, a couple guys. Yeah, and then there's like a cat who shows up, and it's like Selena Kyle, like at the beginning of that issue, she's like, oh, you know, Siamese cat, you know, you're so annoying and stuff, and then, you know, Batman's in there, and then it's like, oh, there's a Siamese cat, and then he like rescues the cat, you know, save the cat. Throws the cat out of the window as like the cops are shooting at him, and then it's the same cat, and it kind of goes up to the Catwoman and kind of reports back to her, you know, about.
God, Tom, this fucking comic.
Yeah, I'm glad you liked it. It's a classic. Like I'd read it a million times, and it was like, you know, when I was a kid, it was like one of my favorites. It like really blew my mind.
I've already.
And it just keeps getting better. Like I just keep enjoying it more and more. It's like so tight too. It's like, you know, really informative about like how to tell like a really cool story economically.
I'm planning, you know what I'm planning on doing? I'm planning on reading it again in the fall.
Okay, yeah.
With some like warm drink, or like when the trees start losing their leaves,
yeah.
I'm gonna like.
Well, because it has like dates in it too, which is kind of cool, because it is like year one, so it's like, let me see like where it starts. So it starts January 4th, and then it ends like December 3rd or something. Yeah, December 3rd.
Like the snow's falling, and like it's just awesome. I've already reread Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow too.
Oh, cool!
So
yeah,
I'm gonna get that really nice version that you have.
Yeah, it's the way to go. That was like I have this. I have the trade. I have the single issues, and then I have the 2-volume thing. So like, yeah, and if they come out with another like really cool one, yeah, why not?
Thanks for telling me about all these really great comics, Tom.
No, it's fun sharing them and getting your perspective on them.
I appreciate it. Like you're helping me build my comic collection.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the good stuff. Yeah, the shame is it's like oh, I wish I could be reading this stuff for the first time now. Like, but the shame is there's not like a million things like this. You know, like these things are like a little, you know, they are kind of rarefied air. It's not like I'm gonna have like this big stack this high of like, oh, you like Batman Year One? Here's more. It's kind of, you know.
No, this is great. I give me the fucking play the hits.
Yeah, exactly. I'm Tom Scioli, author of I Am Stan, a graphic biography of the legendary Stan Lee.
I'm Matt Zeoli.
Saturday, May 6th is Free Comic Book Day, and there's going to be a Free Comic Book Day edition of I Am Stan. It's a comic book sized excerpt of the book. It's some pretty cool stuff in there, so let your local retailer know that you want a copy so they can set aside one for you.
You can follow me on Instagram at cinema_tomb.
And you can follow me on Instagram at Tom_Scioli, on Twitter at Tom Scioli. Go check out my Patreon. Go to patreon.com and search Tom Scioli, and you can see all different comics I've been working on and new stuff that I post.
You can follow the show on Instagram at total_recall_show.
On Free Comic Book Day, I'm going to be doing a signing at Phantom of the Attic Comics Oakland in Pittsburgh from 1:30 to 4, so I'll see you there.
The Total Recall signal has like appeared.
Commissioner Ferrigno is shining the Total Recall show signal.
He's like up on the top of the building.